Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas here on France 24. I'm Delano de Souza. Coming up, we will be focusing on Canada ahead of the election next week. Canadians will be heading to the polls on the 21st of October. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is fighting to keep the country's top job. Opinion polls show his popularity is at near record lows, and if he does return to office, he will be in a weakened position. Here's a look back at Trudeau's tenure, which has been far from scandal-free.
Nearly 50 years after his father, Justin Trudeau followed suit and was elected Prime Minister of Canada in October 2015. The next 4 years would be followed by a flurry of diplomatic activity, notably negotiating 2 major trade agreements, CETA with Europe and a new version of NAFTA with Mexico and the USA.
There was a long way to go because Donald Trump really piled on the pressure, not just to renegotiate, but to leave NAFTA. So at the beginning, there was a lot of work to do. There were taxes on aluminium and steel, which upped the pressure. Simply put, just getting to the finish line was a victory for the Liberals.
Trudeau's record on the national level speaks for itself too. With 1.2 million jobs created during his time in office, unemployment sank to its lowest level in 40 years. His Liberal Party also boosted family allowances and lowered taxes for the middle class, a policy he has no intention of abandoning anytime soon.
A re-elected Liberal government will make sure the middle class and those working hard to join it have more money tax-free. Under our plan, middle-class Canadians won't pay taxes on the first $15,000 of income they earn.
However, beyond his economic achievements, the Canadian leader's been contradictory, especially when it comes to the environment. On one hand, a carbon tax and grand promises.
We'll hit net zero emissions by the year 2050.
Though at the same time, Trudeau's government continues developing infrastructure that contributes to climate change, like the Trans Mountain Network. The pipeline pumps 300,000 barrels every day from Alberta's oil sands over 1,200 kilometres to tankers in the Pacific.
They're also proposing tanker traffic that would triple the capacity, not just the tankers that you see in the inlet here, but super tankers, and it's just too much.
Mr. Trudeau, your answer.
Justin Trudeau has also had his work cut out in moving past scandals which have twice seen him caught short by Canada's Office of Conflict of Interest and Ethics. First of all, for his holidays on an Indian billionaire and lobbyist's private island in early 2017, and then for murky behaviour with SNC-Lavalin. Trudeau was accused of interfering with a Justice Ministry case against the construction firm in an attempt to save jobs. SNC-Lavalin is accused of fraud and corruption over the decade 2001 to 2011 for paying bribes to Libya's Muammar Gaddafi in return for large public contracts.
For more, we can bring in Frédéric Mérand, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Montreal. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, we just heard there from that story, Trudeau has been good for the economy. Unemployment is so low in Canada, but why is he facing such a tough time with this election?
Well, he fulfilled most of his electoral promises from 2015, that's true, and the economy is strong. But he ran also on an image, and his image to some extent has turned into a liability. So he came to power promising sunny ways and a very ethical government. And some of the cases were mentioned in your report just now. Like the SNC-Lavalin, and also on the environment. So what happens now is that he's bleeding votes on his left to the New Democratic Party, which is running on a greener, more left-wing campaign, and also in Quebec to the Bloc Québécois, which is criticizing his most multicultural arguments or policies. Now, in recent weeks, I would say he's had a couple of gaffes along the campaign trail, where we did have those pictures of him about 17 years ago surface, him with blackface on. Has that hurt him? Probably not a great deal, but it has hurt him to the extent that, people see the Justin Trudeau that was criticized in the past, someone who's maybe not always very credible or not very serious in the way that he behaves. And so that has been a problem between, again, there's a gap between the image that he portrayed, that he projected in the past, and the image that he has now, which is that of a normal prime minister who makes mistakes, has to make compromises, and of course that disappoints a lot of people.
Because, he does have this international image of, not being this very good-looking international statesman. In terms of his legacy, what's it been like?
Well, again, I mean, on the social front, they've been quite progressive. The economy has been doing pretty well. On the environment, he has a major issue with the pipeline, which has put a lot of people, especially on the left side, against him. But he has also tried to impose a carbon tax against the will of several provinces. So he has a policy legacy, I would say. He's also changed Canadian politics to a great extent. He may still be in government next week, but at best, that will be a minority government.
We'll see what happens now. The Liberal Party leader, Justin Trudeau, is in a tight race with the Conservatives, but both are losing ground in the key province of Quebec, where a new secularism law is at the centre of many voters' minds. The law restricts the use of religious symbols, and some see it as discriminatory. Gloria Henriquez reports.
Mandeep Kaur wants to be a lawyer, but her dream might be over in Quebec before it's even begun.
I feel excluded, and as a second-class citizen, in the future I will have my, my background, my education. I'm bilingual as well, so to judge me by my physical appearance, it's really sad.
Quebec recently passed a new secularism law known as Bill 21. The law restricts government employees such as lawyers, prosecutors, nurses, and teachers from wearing religious symbols like Kaur's turban when they work.
This turban means something to me. It means equality. Both male and the females wearing a religion. Me wearing something on my body, it's my choice.
Bill 21 is currently being contested in court provincially. Opponents argue that it's discriminatory and unfairly targets religious minorities. The law has become an important issue for many voters in Canada's federal election, since the Prime Minister could also step in and challenge it at the federal level.
Very important, absolutely, in order to keep our identity, I mean. It's not easy here in Quebec.
I don't agree with Bill 21 as it is. I don't agree that it should be applied to teachers, but I agree it should apply to people in positions of coercive authority.
Jagmeet Singh is Sikh and the leader of the New Democratic Party. He is the only candidate who wears a religious symbol that is targeted by Bill 21. But with his party trailing in the polls in Quebec, where the majority support the law, he's been careful about his approach. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer also says he won't meddle. His party is also trailing in the polls in Quebec. So far, the incumbent, Liberal Party leader Justin Trudeau, is the only one who said he's willing to step in and challenge the bill. The Conservatives and Liberals are neck and neck in the polls. But in Quebec, they're both losing ground to the Bloc Québécois, a party that stands for separation from Canada and have strongly supported the province's right to impose Bill 21. Meanwhile, Kaur's future in Quebec hangs in the balance. She says she will fight until the law disappears, and she's hoping whoever wins October 21st will do so too.
Now we can bring in Frédéric Mérand in once again. I just want to ask you, is Canadian secularism up for debate here?
Well, there's no Canadian secularism. The issue is very much alive in the province of Quebec, which is influenced by the French debate around laïcité. And the term is used in French in a way that's very different in the rest of Canada. And it's also important to mention that Bill 21 in Quebec is milder than most comparable law in continental Europe. So it is, but in the North American context, it is quite special to require laïcité from public servants. And here, in this federal election, the issue has been less about the law itself, I would say, which has been a debate inside Quebec, than an issue in federal-provincial relations. And the Bloc Québécois is basically saying, no matter what you think about the law, it's an issue for Quebecers to decide among themselves and not for the federal government to intervene.
I want to talk about the Conservative Party now in Canada because Andrew Scheer has been polling neck and neck with Justin Trudeau. Would a victory for the Conservative Party change a whole lot for Canada?
Well, right now, they're not likely to have a majority government. They could have a minority government. It would be difficult for them to govern by themselves because most of the other parties are on the center-left part of the spectrum. So it would be easier for a minority Liberal government to be put in place. But the Conservative could possibly form a coalition or an alliance of sorts with the Bloc Québécois around the notion of provincial autonomy. One problem for Justin Trudeau has been that Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader, has led a fairly dull campaign, so he's not been very frightening for most people, and that's a problem for Justin Trudeau.
Frédéric Mérand, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Today. Now, France 24's culture show Encore is taking you to Canada to meet some of the artists leading what is being called an Indigenous Renaissance. I'm now joined on set by the producer of the show, Jennifer Ben Ibrahim. Good to see you, Jen.
Hi, Delano.
Tell us more.
So we decided to travel to Canada because UNESCO declared 2019 the International Year of Indigenous Languages. And did you know there are over 70 Indigenous languages actually spoken in Canada? Now, one of the languages spoken, or as you're about to hear, sung, is Wolastoqey. Take a listen. So that was musician and activist Jeremy Dutcher singing in Wolastoqey, and that's a language spoken by fewer than 100 people around the world. Now, Jeremy is leading what has been called Canada's Indigenous Renaissance since winning a Polaris Award last year for his debut album. Now, to give you an understanding of Polaris Award, that's sort of like the Canadian equivalent to the Grammys. And he's really used this platform as a means to call out the loss of Indigenous language and culture in Canada, because in 2019, just 16% of Indigenous people speak their own language.
Why is that?
Well, many are kind of linking this loss of language with Canada's colonial past. In 1876, the Canadian government passed the Indian Act, which led to the creation of residential schools. Now, over 150,000 Indigenous children were taken away from their families and forced to forget their language, forget their culture, and these schools existed up until 1996. And that is why, for Jeremy Dutcher, singing his songs in his language is actually an act of defiance.
Europeans showed up to this continent and they thought we had nothing to offer them, you know? They thought of us as subhuman, with no value in our languages.
Thank you very much for that, Jenny. And that wraps up this edition of Inside the Americas. From all of us on the team, thank you very much for watching.